Dr. Melanie Barton is an experiencer and also a psychotherapist. She's also an ordained minister, an advocate, and an author. She recently spoke at a Contact and Consciousness Summit on raising your vibrational frequency while connecting to your higher consciousness, and she joins us now. Hello, Melanie, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
I mentioned you're a contact experiencer. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences and how far back it goes?
It goes back as far as infancy, and it goes back beyond that to my grandmother used to talk about little green Martian men that she had to have contact with. For me, I always had a guide that was with me until I went to kindergarten. He was about a 3-foot tall gray, and I nicknamed him Robbie. And he and I would have ongoing conversations that would be telepathic. And when I got ready to go to kindergarten, he told me that he was going to have to go. And I said, "What do you mean go?" And he said, "Well, I can't go to school with you." And I said, "But why not? You're my friend." And he said, "Well, not everybody can see me, and not everybody's going to understand me." And of course, my parents didn't. They thought I was crazy, like they claimed that my Granny Mildred was. And so he told me that he would still be around, but that I wouldn't necessarily be able to see him. And so he left, and I kind of forgot about him until other events happened in my life. And I can go into that now if you want. It's all connected with
Well,
it.
I just wanted to ask firstly, as a child and having experiences like that, did that have any effect on you? Did it cause issues like kind of making you a bit of an outsider at school?
I was an outsider, and I was very sickly as a child, so I lost a lot of time from school. And while I was losing time from school, I was having contact not just with things like Robbie, but I could see fairies. I could communicate with them. I would see spirits. I would see angels. And I just thought everybody did. And my parents would say to me, "Don't talk about that stuff. People will think you're crazy like Granny, so don't do that." So I learned to squelch that. And I would know things that were going to happen, and I would sometimes blurt it out, but then it would be like, "No, no, you can't, don't do that." And so over time, I tried to squelch it, but the more I tried to squelch it, the more I became confused, because to me, this was a natural part of who I was, but I was told, "You can't do that."
Yeah, and I think back to when I was at school, like elementary and high school, and there were always the kids there that seemed normal on the outside, but you knew something was bothering them, and they seemed to kind of be a little bit of an outsider. And I always thought it may have been a problem at home, but maybe it was that they were having experiences. I mean, would you agree with that? I mean, would that
Yes,
make sense?
yes, it would. And as I grew up and studied psychology and social work and psychotherapy, I learned that a lot of these people had the same kind of experiences that I did, and they just learned to go inward, and they would have their own private world inside or around like-minded people, but to the rest of the world, they were just odd. They didn't fit in.
Yeah. So your parents also didn't believe your grandmother's stories?
Oh, in my book, Quicksand, it talks about that. The reason they tried to squelch it is that my mother was psychic as well as my grandmother. And my mother didn't want to be ostracized like her mother was. So she tried to quell it in me, to quiet it, so
Mm,
that I wouldn't encounter the same things.
right. Okay, so moving on as from a child, so the experiences continued?
Oh, yes. When I was in high school, my mom and my sister, my parents were divorced by this point. They went away for a weekend, and I was having a fever because I was sick a lot. And so I opted to stay home. And when I stayed home, I was reading the Sunday school paper that I got, and it talked about ghosts. And it scared me so bad that I went downstairs and put it outside in our rubbish barrel so that I wouldn't have to see it. And I went back in the house and I went to bed. And when I got up to get something out of my closet in the morning, that Sunday school paper was on my closet floor. And I could feel that the evil that that paper talked about was in the house, and I became frozen. I couldn't do anything. So I learned through church, that this was an evil spirit and that I needed to get rid of it, but I didn't know how to do that. So I continued to be very overly involved in church, thinking that that would make me normal.
Mm-hmm.
And it did exactly the opposite. And so in October of 1969, a spirit showed up at the end of my bed. I look at it now as an angel. And it told me that I was to go to Rochester, New York, where my sister had moved to, and that I was to go there. And I said, no, I don't want to go there. There's people there that I know that I don't want to be around. And it just said, go. So within 48 hours, I had packed up everything and I moved to Rochester, New York to follow what the spirit said. So from there, I had other encounters. We lived in a haunted house in Syracuse, New York. And I knew that it was haunted because I could see the person. So I went across the street to my landlord and I said, so who is it that's in the basement that's hammering and sawing all the time at night? And he laughed and he said, oh, that was Mr. I think it was McNeil or something was his name. He said he died at his workbench in the house. And I said, well, he's still there. So when I would go out of the house and come back, the lights were on. At one point in time, there was music playing on the radio that was called My Melanie Makes Me Smile. So I called the radio station to ask who's the musician that's singing that. They said, we're not playing that song.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was pretty scary.
Yeah.
Yes.
But were these incidences malevolent or were just kind of mischievous?
Then I thought they were seeking to do me harm, but I found out later they were just because they knew I could see them. They were trying to let me know they were there. And over time, through other experiences, I learned how to acknowledge them. And for many of them, they didn't know they were dead. And my job was to help them go to the light, which eventually I did.
Right, right. Did your grey ET friend ever return?
Yes. On February 26, 1991, during surgery, I had a near-death experience. You go through the traditional tunnel. The person that greeted me there was Mitchell. Mitchell was 16 at the time in the experience. He was the son I miscarried. And I recognized him immediately, called him by name, and he knew me. And he ferried me across the water to the other shore. And on the shore were the loved ones that died, my Granny Mildred, my Grandpa Albert, Robbie, the ET, the spirit guide that lived in my wardrobe in my bedroom, the Indian chief, the spirit that was at the end of my bed. And they all said to me, we are all connected. We're all one. It's all about love. And I said, well, this is my second near-death experience. So do I get to stay now? And they said, no. And I said, well, why did you bring me here? They said, because before you came into this incarnation, you agreed to do certain things. And we need to help you get on track to do that. So we're going to show you what it is that's going to happen. You won't remember it until it happens. So they brought me back in my body. When I woke up, I was different. I was not the same person. I was no longer religiously rigid. I didn't believe in a literal heaven and hell. I knew that everything was connected. And they said, your mission for this lifetime, you are to love those that feel unlovable, including my mom at the time, until they can love themselves. And then from that time forward, they began to speak to me more directly, more clearly, show me things I was supposed to do, including setting up a holistic healing practice, complete with a massage therapist, nutritionist, chiropractor, all of those things, and did that within 90 days. So
Wow. And now you counsel other experiences.
right, and as well as other things in my psychotherapy practice, but yes, I do.